The number of times I've tried to make this video is actually ridiculous. Seriously, like, this is probably my 20th attempt at putting something coherent together, but every time I hit record, I start questioning my argument. I start thinking, is this even a solid argument, or am I coming off as a hater? But you know what? This time feels different. Wanna know why? Alright, lean in. Closer. Closer. A little bit closer. I'm done talking about The Legend of Korra. Like, seriously, I'm over it. I don't care. I don't care about being labeled a hater anymore. I just want to move on to something I actually enjoy, like Ping Pong the Animation. Check that out on Sunday. So if you haven't seen The Legend of Korra or my last couple of reviews, don't sweat it. I'm about to give you the 411, the rundown. Alright, this is pretty much going to be a basic recap from memory because I don't really feel like going into all the meat and potatoes. It's kind of like, if you've seen it, cool. If you haven't seen it, then this is for you. Alright, season 1, Korra, we find her training. She already knows 3 of the 4 elements. She doesn't know airbending. She gets sent to Republic City to be trained by Aang's son,
Tenzin. Tenzin has 2 daughters and a son. They are all airbenders. Korra's the only non-airbender. Korra's really excited because she wants to see the real world. She's always been stuck inside the White Lotus boot camp. Korra's bad at her job. She goes to Airbender Island. She sucks at airbending. She runs away. She joins a circus or something. She bullies people because she's the Avatar. She breaks up a brotherhood of 2 brothers and makes this guy break up with his girlfriend or something. Some kind of romantic stuff. Anyway, she doesn't learn airbending. She realizes that she needs airbending, Deus Ex Machina. It comes out of nowhere. She uses airbending, and the villain unalives himself. Why? Because Season 2 starts. Korra somehow masters airbending. Oh my goodness. And she gets all of her bending back, by the way. In Season 1, she lost her airbending. Anyway, all of her bending. Anyway, now her and Mako are dating. Also, yeah, she's homewrecker. To see her uncle or something, and spirits are doing something. And then a dark avatar appears, and then kaijus, and Season 2 is like an acid trip. Anyway, Season 3. Season 2 doesn't matter. Anyway, Season 4. Earthbender Hitler shows up. Bad lady. She beats the brakes off of Korra, which is earthbending. Korra is bad because she's poisoned. Okay. Toph shows up. Teaches Korra to unpoison herself. Korra fights
the Earthbender Hitler, who's now off of her game, just like how Korra was off of her game in the beginning. Korra doesn't necessarily beat her, but she doesn't lose against her either. And then she can bend lasers. The end. That's the end of Korra. If that didn't make any sense, don't worry. Oh yeah, Korra's gay now. Also, if that didn't make any sense, don't worry. It doesn't matter. That's really how I felt watching the show. And, you know, a little bit of context, if you were growing up in the early 2000s and you saw Avatar Last Airbender, like, man, this is going to be amazing. The sequel, and then you watch The Legend of Korra, you were very disappointed, and then eventually you got put online, and a lot of stuff. That's the recap. Now, with all that out of the way, let's start with the first category, the story/plot. So the plot for The Legend of Korra is probably one of the most divisive elements of the series, or of the show. While the show initially promises like a pretty exciting continuation to the world that was developed in Avatar: The Last Airbender, the execution of that continuation is very hot doo-doo butter garbage. Each season is scarred with this repetitive, sometimes completely nonsensical structure with overarching narratives that feel really underdeveloped or just straight up reset each season. Within my quick recap of the entirety of the series, you saw how each plot kind of just bounced around, and although I was making it sound more confusing for like comedic effect, it's actually pretty confusing. Take, for example, the main antagonist inside the first season, Amon and Equalist. Amon literally unalives himself at the end of Season 1, and the problems that the Equalist brought up in Season 1, like unfair pay, non-equal opportunities, so on and so forth, are completely pretty much forgotten by Season 2, and they go over a completely different issue in a completely different nation. And you can argue that, like, you know, where we're getting the traveling aspect, but what was the point in bringing us to like good old Republic City if we're just going to travel the world anyway? Not to mention, instead of grappling with the idea of making an avatar bad, we literally got an evil version of the avatar, like the Nega Chin. It's very contrived, very, very tropey, and honestly not really indicative of a good overarching story, let alone plot. And then at the end of season 4, we get this arbitrary justification for the plot to pretend like there was some real through line through each season, but in reality there was nothing really putting it together, and it felt more like, hey, here are some cool ideas and let's just write. Section 2, character development. I kind of touched on this a little bit inside the first part, but for character development, the characters in The Legend of Korra deserve significant criticism for their lack of development. They develop like a wet piece of bread in a toaster. They developed as much as paint drying on a wall. Korra, the protagonist, undergoes multiple resets in her journey, often facing, if not the same issue, similar issues with identity, leadership, and responsibility without really showing any substantial growth. Literally in season 2, she loses her memory and resets. And then in season 3, she goes through trauma and resets. And then in season 4, she goes through more trauma and resets. So again, her main issue is being headstrong, but in brash and arrogant. These character flaws are never fully explored in a meaningful way, and that really hinders her as a character, and she's our main character. Furthermore, secondary characters like Mako, Bolin, and Asami are giving minimal development, with Mako's romantic tensions with Korra and Asami feeling more like filler rather than a meaningful arc that like leads into Mako becoming like a better person. Mako goes from being a pretty decent guy to being seen and perceived as a horrible guy to then again being a decent guy as a cop. Bolin goes from being an idiot to an idiot with money. And then Asami goes from being a spoiled rich kid to being a girl boss spoiled rich kid. So everyone kind of has like flat arcs or goes through the same issues indefinitely. Number 3, acting. I have no real qualms with the voices or the voice acting abilities of the cast in The Legend of Korra. There's not really anything like too crazy. There's no issues in terms of the narrative or the development. The voice acting is one of the areas where The Legend of Korra really excels. Janet Varney's performance as Korra is pretty good. She really brings out like the chaotic energy of Korra and sprinkles in some nuances and the subtleties in her emotions. The acting itself on its own is good. Next, let's move on to cinematography. The cinematography in the show is probably one of the most notable things about this show. It is definitely a strong point. It doesn't let us down from the original series Avatar: The Last Airbender. The action sequences are actually one of the things that people call out as like the best in the franchise, because inside Avatar: The Last Airbender we did get some action, but there was like nothing really like of note. And in Korra, pretty much every fight scene is something of note. They're very fluid, they're very dynamic. They showcase like stunning animation. For instance, the fight scene between Korra and Amon in season 1 is phenomenal. Or even if you don't care about Korra and Amon, even Korra versus Zahir in season 3, it's just incredible. Even the scene, the scene when Tenzin is being like jumped. They JJK'd him, that scene. Oh, chef's kiss. The cinematography and how the camera just pans behind. Oh, beautiful. So I don't really have anything negative to say about the cinematography, how things are shot. the panning of the camera, the overhead shots, even the opening scene where like it pans up and we see like the CGI and stuff. It's nice. Next, let's go on to the directing of the series. We go from a high and then back down to a low. The direction of The Legend of Korra has definitely been one of those things critiqued all over the internet for its blatant lack of focus and consistency. The show frequently feels like it's pulling itself in a whole bunch of different directions, kind of like tearing not only the story apart, but like the franchise apart and dividing the fandom, with certain storylines and character arcs being abandoned or just poorly executed entirely. For instance, the spiritual aspect of Korra's journey in the second season just felt completely disconnected and mishandled, as if it was never given the weight or clarity that it deserved. Like, there's a lot to unpack with her straight up losing all connections to the other avatars, but still having the avatar state as just like this ultimate trump card. So, like, again, how much of an amp does the avatar state give the characters? Like, is the avatar state the thing that's really defining these characters, or is it the past knowledge? And then also, how did she learn how to do these things? If she's like, if the first avatar was this strong, then like it just opens up all these different questions that didn't necessarily need to be there if the directing in that season was good, for like, leading the writers to writing a better like ending or conclusion to those questions. Additionally, the pacing of the storylines felt very inconsistent, with some episodes dragging out and going on forever, while others rushed through critical plot points. This really resulted in a show that just failed to fully engage with its audience on an emotional level, as the stakes and the consequences for everything in the series just feeling irrelevant. Number 6, let's talk about the editing. People don't realize how much editing plays a critical role in how stories are conveyed, and The Legend of Korra just suffers from a lot of weak pacing and weak narrative structures. Each season introduces a new antagonist, which could be cool, and these concepts are nice, and the conflicts seemed promising, but they just lacked depth, and they didn't really have any true through lines, therefore leaving us with a feeling of things just like kind of wrapping up like very quickly. Like, Korra loses her airbending at this end of season 1, but then gets it back like, oh, nothing happened. So the editing of the series often undermined the emotional weight of certain events by jumping too quickly from plot point to plot point, leaving the audience with little to no time to absorb these key moments. Now, soundtrack. I'm going to quickly go through soundtrack. I have nothing really too impressive to say about this. Jeremy Zuckerman and Benjamin Wine did a very decent job making the soundtrack. It's not anything to write home about. It's not on the same level as like the final Agni Kai or any of the standout tracks from the original series. But the music it's all right. It's all right. Again, with visual effects, I will have to agree. Like, it's kind of a mixed bag with The Legend of Korra. You get some CGI, you get some really painterly backgrounds, you get some very crisp character designs. Obviously, they sacrifice some of the visuals for CGI and simpler designs to like give us like better fight scenes and stuff. So like, and I won't lie, some of the animation for some of the action sequences does feel a little bit twangy, does feel a little bit like when something's like too nice, when CGI looks like too good inside a movie, like you can tell like it kind of is like, that's not quite right. So like it's not the worst thing ever. It does look nice. Like, I could sit down and be like, oh, this is some nice animation, but overall it's nothing too. I personally would have taken the visuals from Avatar: Last Airbender rather than taking The Legend of Korra, but Legend of Korra's animation and visual effects weren't that bad. Next section, dialogue and writing. Lastly, theme and message. I gotta be frank. I gotta be frank here. There is no real message. A lot of the philosophy, a lot of the themes are very superficial and inconsistent, while the show attempts to tackle really complex issues like social justice and spirituality and leadership and identity. These themes are not executed with the same emotional resonance or even like clarity seen in Avatar: The Last Airbender. These two shows are just not built the same. Korra's spiritual journey, for instance, is handled very, very poorly, with the show failing to adequately explore the complexities of her like character's evolution in the spiritual realm. They use very cheap callbacks to masquerade as a message or a theme, or shock value things like confirming that Korra kissed Asami at the end of book 4 to get people to think, oh yeah, the message here is so good and so deep, but in reality there's nothing. They literally had to take one of the least profound characters from the original series to explain the message at the end of the series. And if you have to explain your message at the end of the series for people to get your message, then maybe you didn't do a good job like portraying that message. So for my final rating, The Legend of Korra gets a 4, below average. The Legend of Korra just honestly struggles with too many things and has too many excuses for why it's struggling with these things, when in reality, if it just buckled down and figured out really what it wanted to be, it could have been better than its predecessor. But in its state now, it just boasts pretty good visuals, decent voice acting, an alright soundtrack, and that's about it. Its weak plot, inconsistent characters, and underwhelming writing makes it too difficult for me to recommend this as like a show that you should watch. I'm not going to say it's hot doo-doo butter garbage water, even though I want to say that. I'm not. I'll be fair here and give The Legend of Korra a 4. Despite its occasional man, you doing all right, kind of moments. So yeah, there you go. That is it. That is my review of The Legend of Korra. On the screen right now, popping by, are just my works cited. Some of the things that some of the other reviews that I kind of looked at when writing my own review, and obviously the series itself. But yep, that's it. I'm done. I'm finished. I'm free. I'm done. And you heard it here, Sunday. Watch out for my next review. Thank you so much for watching, and have yourselves a dang good one. Peace.